In the heart of Florence, Italy, a city steeped in history and art, lies a hidden treasure that has shaped centuries of thought and debate. The Biblioteca Nazionale Centrale, a grand library where ancient manuscripts whisper tales of the past, houses 4 large codices that once belonged to a man named Remigio de Girolami. These codices, meticulously crafted and carefully edited by Remigio himself, contain a wealth of knowledge that has fascinated scholars for generations. Imagine a scribe, hunched over a desk, quill in hand, painstakingly copying nearly 2,700 folios of text. Each page, filled with the scribe's elegant script, bears the marks of Remigio's own hand marginal notes, corrections, and cross-references that weave through the 4 volumes like a complex tapestry. The first of these manuscripts, known as MS Conv. Soper, c. 4.940, is a collection of short treatises on a wide array of subjects. Among them is the De Bono Communi, a work that has drawn attention for its insights into Remigio's political theories. Another treatise, the De Uno es in Christo, has been studied for its similarity to the Christological writings of Remigio's teacher, Thomas Aquinas. The second manuscript, MS Conv. Soper, d. 1.937, is a treasure trove of Saints' Day sermons. These sermons, though incomplete, offer a glimpse into the spiritual life of medieval Florence, with each sermon dedicated to a different saint, weaving together a tapestry of faith and devotion. The third manuscript, MS Conv. Soper, g. 3.465, is a collection of disputed questions, organized alphabetically by subject. It begins with De Angeli composition, a deep dive into the nature of angels, and continues through a range of theological and philosophical topics. These questions, often the subject of heated debates, reflect the intellectual rigor of the time, but it is the fourth manuscript, MS Conv. Soper, g. 4.936, that holds a special place in the annals of history. This volume is a collection of sermon materials, including a series of special occasion sermons that Remigio delivered at various public ceremonies. These sermons, delivered during events such as the handing over of the Florentine Signoria to Charles of Valois in 1301, showcase Remigio's rhetorical prowess and his fiery advocacy for peace, good government, and the balance of power between the papacy and the empire. Among the pages of MS G. 4.936, there is a hidden gem, the only surviving copy of Thomas Aquinas' Principia, the lectures he delivered when he incepted as a master of theology in Paris in 1256. This discovery has shed light on Aquinas' early career and his influence on Remigio, who may have studied under him during his second regency in Paris from 1269 to 1272. Remigio's connection to the great Aquinas adds a layer of significance to this manuscript, making it a vital resource for scholars of medieval theology and philosophy. Less known, but equally important, are the Sermons Prolegales, or introductory sermons that fill the pages from folios 2, 168 va to 3, 145 ra. These sermons, which Remigio identified in an index he appended to the volume, cover a wide range of topics, from theological science to the books of the Bible and the sentences of Peter Lombard. The first 16 sermons are dedicated to the nature of theological science, including commendations of Scripture, divisions of the sciences, and comparisons between the work of theologians and philosophers. Among these, Remigio's own compositions stand out, alongside those attributed to other friars, including Thomas Aquinas and Anibaldo Anibaldi. Following these, Remigio provides a series of 20 prologues to individual books of the Bible, from Job to the Psalms, the Gospels, and the Pauline epistles. Each prologue is a carefully crafted introduction, designed to set the stage for the study of the text. Remigio's method is both systematic and creative, as he often uses the same scriptural text to introduce both a book of the Bible and a book of the sentences of Peter Lombard. For example, he constructs a prologue to Proverbs around the theme, "Cum consumar et homo tunc incipiet." Once a man has finished, then he will begin, which he then uses to introduce the second book of the sentences. These prologues are not just introductions, they are invitations to a deeper understanding of the text. They challenge the reader to see the interconnectedness of Scripture and the sentences, and to appreciate the complexity and beauty of theological study. Remigio's prologues to the sentences are particularly notable, as they offer a detailed division of the text based on Aristotelian principles of causation, reflecting the influence of scholastic philosophy on his work. The collection concludes with 2 sermons that take a broader view, one on science in general and another on the ethics of Aristotle. These sermons, though unheralded in Remigio's index, are a fitting conclusion to the Sermones Prolegales. They explore the natural human desire for knowledge and the delights that philosophy has to offer, drawing on the wisdom of Aristotle to inspire and guide the reader. These Sermones Prolegales are more than just a collection of introductory sermons. They are a window into the intellectual life of a Dominican Studium Generale, where each school year began with a series of lectures designed to set the stage for the year's study. They reflect the deep commitment to learning and the pursuit of knowledge that characterized the medieval world, and they continue to inspire and inform scholars today. The curriculum at the Dominican Studium Generale closely mirrored the University of Paris, with a key difference. Theology was taught in a structured, 3-part format. The principal teacher or lector delivered the main lectures on the Bible, focusing on the most significant contemporary interpretations. The order required that the Bible be covered at a pace of 1 book per year, with shorter books sometimes paired together. Important texts like the Gospels could take 2 years to cover. In addition to the Bible, the lector was also required to lecture on one of the 4 books of Peter Lombard's Sentences each year. This text served as a framework for exploring the theological implications of Scripture, often through the lens of Thomas Aquinas' teachings. The lector also led regular debates known as questions disputati on issues arising from the lectures, and occasionally more extensive quadlibtal disputations that showcased the order's Thomistic philosophy. Each Studium Generale also had a cursor sententiarum, a teacher who covered all 4 books of Lombard's Sentences in a single academic year through concise, straightforward lectures. This ensured that students who typically stayed for only 1 or 2 years would still be exposed to the full text. Unlike the University of Paris, which had a cursor biblicus to provide cursory lectures on the Bible, the Dominican Studium Generale substituted this with a course in moral philosophy. The master of students, who acted as a tutor, was responsible for lecturing on Aristotle's Ethics, or Thomas Aquinas' commentaries on Aristotelian ethics. This substitution was made because the students, by the time they reached the Studium Generale, had already received several years of cursory Bible lectures in their conventual schools. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence that Remigio de Girolami's Sermones Prolegales were actually schoolroom lectures is the way he refers to his own teaching practices and the structure of the courses. For example, he often mentions the previous year's material and the transition to a new cycle of lectures. He notes that he had already covered certain texts in previous years and is now moving on to the next part. In his prologue to 1 Corinthians, he explains that he had just finished lecturing on the letter to the Romans the previous year, and is now starting with 1 Corinthians, following the order in which Paul wrote his letters. Remigio also describes the challenges of teaching, such as when he had to take on the role of prior at the Santa Maria Novella community, which temporarily interrupted his lectures. He had to find a replacement who, unfortunately, did not continue with the same text, leading Remigio to return to the unfinished work the following year. This kind of personal anecdote provides insight into the day-to-day life of a Dominican lector. In his prologue to the 4th book of the Sentences, Remigio explains why the 4th book is typically taught immediately after the 1st, rather than following the 2nd and 3rd. He notes that the 4th book is easier to understand, more relevant to the sacraments, and more useful for the laity and practicing priests. Additionally, teaching it during Lent is practical because it allows for a less demanding curriculum when students are busier with their pastoral duties. The structure of Remigio's prologues also reflects the academic nature of his lectures. He often begins with a division of the text, breaking it down into its components, such as the efficient, formal, material, and final causes. This method was standard practice in university settings, and further supports the idea that these prologues were intended for the classroom, not the pulpit. In the bustling academic world of medieval Europe, the work of Remigio de Girolami stands out as a remarkable example of how scholars combine deep theological reflection with the practical demands of teaching. Remigio, a Dominican friar, crafted his lectures with a blend of philosophical rigor and pedagogical insight, making his teachings both profound and accessible to his students. One of Remigio's most notable works is his collection of prologues, or introductory lectures, to various texts, particularly the Sentences by Peter Lombard. The Sentences was a foundational textbook in medieval theology, and Remigio's approach to introducing it is a testament to his skill in merging different aspects of Aristotelian causation with the structure of the text itself. Remigio begins his prologue to the Sentences by acknowledging God as the principal efficient cause, the ultimate source of inspiration for the text. He then credits Peter Lombard, the human author, as the instrumental efficient cause. This distinction is important because it sets the stage for a deeper exploration of the text's meaning and structure. The material cause, or the subject matter of the Sentences, is also carefully considered. Remigio divides the text into 4 books, each focusing on different aspects of Christian theology. The first book deals with God and the Trinity, the second with the created universe, the third with Christ and the Incarnation, and the fourth with the sacraments of the new law. Each of these topics is seen as a foundation, much like the layers of a building. For example, the first book is the uncreated foundation, the second is the created foundation, the third is the incarnate foundation, and the fourth is the renewed foundation. Remigio's division of the text is not just a structural exercise, it is also a way to guide his students through the complex theological ideas presented in the Sentences. By linking the material cause to the concept of a foundation, he emphasizes the importance of each part in building a comprehensive understanding of Christian doctrine. The formal cause, or the form of the text, is touched upon in the word second in the phrase fundamentum. Secundus sapphirus, the second foundation was sapphire. Remigio explains that Peter Lombard was not among the first teachers but among the second, building upon the teachings of earlier church fathers. This highlights the importance of tradition and the cumulative nature of theological knowledge. The final cause, or the purpose of the text, is reflected in the word sapphire, which symbolizes the text's power to heal and guide. Remigio draws a parallel between the sapphire's healing properties and the Sentences' ability to provide spiritual guidance and wisdom. In his prologues, Remigio also pays homage to the unique status of the Sentences in medieval education. He notes that it is the only foundational text regularly taught in the schools, emphasizing its importance for both students and masters of theology. This respect for the Sentences is evident in his own teaching, as he uses the text to introduce and deepen his students' understanding of Christian doctrine. Remigio's prologues are not just introductory lectures, they are a reflection of his broader teaching philosophy. He begins his notebook with the inaugural lectures of Thomas Aquinas, a clear sign of his respect for the great theologian's work. These lectures, which commend the study of Scripture and the law of God, set the tone for the entire collection. Remigio's own prologues follow this pattern, blending general commendations of sacred doctrine with detailed divisions of specific texts. The structure of Remigio's prologues mirrors the academic year at Santa Maria Novella. The longer, more general prologues serve as the annual openings, welcoming students back to the term, while the more detailed introductions to individual texts are the resumption lectures, where the real teaching begins. This structure reflects the comprehensive nature of the Dominican curriculum, which covered a wide range of subjects, from the Bible to moral philosophy. One of the best examples of Remigio's teaching can be found in his postili, or running commentaries, on the Song of Songs. These commentaries, preserved in manuscripts at the Bibliote, Commedia Lorenziana in Florence, provide a glimpse into his classroom practices. The prologue to the Song of Songs, which is repeated at the beginning of the commentary, shows how Remigio uses the 4 senses of Scripture, literal, allegorical, moral, and anagogical, to explain the text's deeper meanings. He spends considerable time discussing the metaphorical language of the Song of Songs and the various interpretations of Solomon's bride, ultimately settling on Pharaoh's daughter as the most suitable metaphor for the church. The transition from the prologue to the commentary is a clear indication of Remigio's teaching style. He introduces the text's themes and structure in the prologue, setting the stage for the detailed exegesis that follows. This approach ensures that students have a solid foundation before diving into the more intricate details of the text. Remigio's prologues and commentaries are not just academic exercises. They are a record of his lifelong dedication to teaching and the formation of Dominican friars. Through his work, we gain insight into the educational practices of the time and the ways in which medieval scholars transmitted knowledge to future generations. Remigio de Girolami's contributions to medieval theology and education are a testament to his skill as a teacher and his deep understanding of the texts he taught. His prologues and commentaries continue to provide valuable insights into the intellectual and spiritual life of the Dominican Order at the turn of the 14th century. The Dominican Order, established in the early 13th century, placed a strong emphasis on education and scholarship. One of the key requirements for a Dominican priory was to have a minimum of 12 friars, including a prior and a lector, who was responsible for running the conventual school. The curriculum in these schools focused heavily on lectures and disputations about the Bible and the sentences of Peter Lombard, a foundational text in medieval theology. The development of Dominican schools, known as studia, was a significant part of the order's educational system. These schools were categorized into different levels, with the studium particulare being a specialized course focusing mainly on the sentences of Peter Lombard, and the studium generale, covering both the Bible and the sentences, providing a broader theological education. The term particularis was used by the Dominicans to denote a specialized course, distinguishing it from the more comprehensive studium generale. In 1281, the Dominican Order established 4 studia theologiae in key locations, including Rome. The Roman theology program, in particular, became a significant center for theological studies. One of the most notable figures associated with this program was Thomas Aquinas, who taught at the convent of Santa Sabina in Rome. His teaching there is believed to have influenced the development of his famous work, the Summa Theologiae. The city of Florence also played a crucial role in Dominican education. It was consistently chosen to host a cursor sententiarum, a traveling teacher who would lecture on the sentences of Peter Lombard. This appointment was a clear indication of Florence's importance in the Dominican educational network. The studium at Santa Maria Novella in Florence, in particular, became a prominent center for theological studies. In the late 13th and early 14th centuries, the Dominican Order in Italy faced administrative changes. Pope Boniface VIII requested that the order's administrative units better reflect the political realities of the time. As a result, the Roman province was divided, leading to the creation of new educational centers. For example, the Studium Generale in Florence was assigned students and teachers, reflecting its growing importance. One of the key figures in the Florentine Studium was Remigio de Girolami. He served as a lector in Florence and was later appointed as a master in theology. Remigio's career is well documented, and his works, including sermons and commentaries, are preserved in manuscripts at the Biblioteca Nazionale Centrale in Florence. His sermons and writings provide valuable insights into the theological and educational practices of the Dominican Order during this period. The curriculum at the Dominican Studio was structured to cover a wide range of theological topics. For example, the Studium Generale in Florence included lectures on the sentences of Peter Lombard and the Bible. Remigio de Girolami's notes and sermons, preserved in the manuscripts, offer a detailed look at the content and structure of these courses. His sermons often began with a biblical passage and then delved into theological discussions, reflecting the integration of scripture and doctrine in Dominican education. The study of the Dominican Order's educational system during this period reveals a sophisticated and well-organized approach to theological education. The Order's emphasis on rigorous training in both the Bible and the sentences of Peter Lombard ensured that its members were well prepared to engage in scholarly and pastoral work. The legacy of this educational model can still be seen in the enduring influence of Dominican scholars like Thomas Aquinas and Remigio de Girolami. Fra Remigio de Girolami, a prominent Dominican friar and scholar of the late 13th century, played a significant role in the intellectual and religious life of Florence. His contributions to theology, politics, and education are well documented, and his influence extended far beyond his immediate community. This chapter delves into his life, works, and the context in which he lived, providing a comprehensive overview of his significance. Remigio served as the prior pro tempore at Santa Maria Novella from June 1293. His appointment was recorded in the Roman Provincial Acts, highlighting the trust placed in him by his order. Despite his initial hesitation and self-professed lack of confidence, he took on the responsibility with dedication. In a sermon, he reflected on his duties, emphasizing the importance of obedience and trust in God's guidance. One of Remigio's notable works is his commentary on the Book of Revelation, where he discusses the symbolism of the angels and their trumpets. For example, he explains the fourth angel's trumpet as a metaphor for the sentences of Peter Lombard, a foundational text in medieval theology. He delves into the numerical, general, and material aspects of the text, showing how the order of scripture and lecture can differ due to various practical and educational considerations. Remigio's approach to the sentences is methodical, breaking down the text into its efficient, material, formal, and final causes. He identifies God as the principal cause, Peter Lombard as the instrumental cause, and the content of the sentences as the material cause. The formal cause is the structure of the text, which follows the teachings of earlier scholars, and the final cause is the spiritual and intellectual benefits it provides to its readers. In his commentary on the Song of Songs, Remigio explores the metaphors used to describe the relationship between Christ and the Church. He divides the book into 6 parts, each focusing on a different aspect of the relationship between the bride and the bridegroom. He emphasizes the spiritual interpretation, highlighting the Church's desire for Christ, her affirmation of his presence, and her joy in his grace. Remigio's works are preserved in several manuscripts, including those from the Bibliote, commentaries Lorenziana in Florence. These manuscripts, such as MS Conv. Sapper 362 and MS Conv. Sapper 516, contain his commentaries on various biblical and theological texts. These documents provide valuable insights into his teaching methods and the educational practices of the time. Beyond his theological writings, Remigio was also a political theorist. His treatise on the Bono Commune, Common Good, reflects his views on the relationship between the Church and the state. He argued for a balanced approach where the Church and the state could coexist harmoniously, each serving its unique role in the community. This perspective was particularly relevant during a time of significant political and social change in Florence. Remigio's influence extended to his students, including the renowned poet Dante Alighieri. His teachings and writings contributed to the intellectual and spiritual landscape of medieval Florence, shaping the ideas and beliefs of his contemporaries and future generations. In summary, Fra Remigio de Girolami was a multifaceted figure whose contributions to theology, education, and political thought have left a lasting legacy. His works continue to be studied and appreciated for their depth and insight, offering a window into the rich intellectual and spiritual life of medieval Italy.